Oh no, it just keeps getting worse. Former Battlefield director Marcus Leto basically said he's disappointed that many Ridgeline game devs who helped build the foundation of Battlefield 6 were omitted from the final game credits, including himself. Now, is this guy just salty, or does he have a point here? We're going to get into it right now. Please like, subscribe, click the bell icon, and play the game. We'll be playing Battlefield every day on stream, so come join us. Come join me as I play Battlefield 6. I love this game. I've fallen in love with this game so much. Battlefield is officially back. So let's jump in. Like, subscribe, click the bell icon if you love Battlefield. But let's jump into the news. So former Battlefield game director Marcus Leto says he's disappointed that Ridgeline Games developers who helped build the foundation of Battlefield 6 were omitted from the final credits, including himself. Now, if you don't know who Ridgeline Games are, basically they were an American development studio based in Kirkland and Seattle, Washington, and owned by Electronic Arts. The studio was announced on September 28, 2022 to lead the development of Battlefield 6's new narrative campaign set in Battlefield's universe. Now, we've heard a lot about the Battlefield 6 campaign, about it being buggy, about it just feeling like, you know, they put a lot of effort into it, but ultimately released it unfinished. And a big part of that could be because Ridgeline Games was shuttered by EA in 2024 because a lot of the people, including key people like Marcus Leto, basically chose to walk away from the project. Basically, on February 28, 2024, following the departure of Marcus Leto, EA announced an action to wind down Ridgeline Games as a standalone studio and relocate some of the employees to Ripple Effect Studios with single-player campaign overseen by Criterion Games instead. And obviously, Ridgeline Games, supposedly, if you're going to believe Marcus Leto here, basically they were behind the key foundation that is Battlefield 6 and Battlefield 6's campaign. And the reason why, you know, for whatever reason, he left the project early on and the studio got shuttered could be the reason why the campaign just wasn't as satisfying or as fulfilling as, you know, we all thought it was going to be. So let's see what he had to say. So former Battlefield director Marcus Leto says he's disappointed after noticing that so he's just noticing that many Ridgeline Games developers who helped build the foundation of Battlefield 6 were left out or buried in the credits, including himself. Obviously, BF6 has been one of EA's biggest launches in years. Released on October 10th, the game saw over 7 million copies sold in just like 3 days, making it the biggest debut in Battlefield history. Built under the Battlefield Studios banner, the project was brought together several teams across the globe: DICE, Ripple Effect, Criterion, Motive Studio, but there was one team that didn't make it to the finish line, and that was Ridgeline Games. Ridgeline was originally founded to lead the game's single-player campaign, headed by Marcus Leto, co-creator of Halo and Studio's VP, Studio GM, and Creative Director. The team spent more than a year and a half developing the campaign's foundation before Leto left voluntarily in early 2024, soon after EA shut down the studio, moving some staff to Ripple Effect while Criterion took over the single-player side. So I don't know exactly, and we'll maybe get into it a little bit more as to why Marcus Leto left. It seems like he's a little bit salty. Now, I don't know the guy. He seems like a nice enough guy, but for him to leave the project a year and a half in, literally voluntarily just leave Ridgeline Games and basically just wash his hands of it, and as a result basically leave the studio, just, you know, but a game director essentially, and have them all relocate to other studios. It kind of seems a little bit selfish on his part. So for him to voluntarily leave, and then now the games came out and it's still a success, he's like, well, I noticed I wasn't in the credits, guys. Like, I don't know the full story, and I don't know him personally. It does seem a little bit weird though for him to, like I said, leave the project half finished and then complain that he wasn't fully credited in the credits, right? He's spoken out. He's not happy with how things turned out in the final release. Marcus Leto calls out missing credits from Battlefield 6. You can't have your cake and eat it too, buddy. In a LinkedIn post, Marcus Leto said he was disappointed to see that many of his former Ridgeline teammates were properly not credited in Battlefield 6. According to him, these developers worked tirelessly for 1 to 2.5 years building the foundation of the game before the studio's closure. Leto claims that most laid-off developers were only mentioned in a special thanks section at the very end of the game credits, while some were omitted entirely, including himself. Well, I feel like if he left the project voluntarily for whatever reason, I don't know, drama, whatever, you know, and left a massive studio, a massive game franchise like Battlefield in the water, just abandoned them. It's a bit cheeky to expect to be given full credit for its success, when you only put in some of the work. Basically just says, oh yeah, we're gonna wash your hands, I'm leaving the studio here, EA, do what you want with this, but we're done with it. To then come back and complain when it's still a success, obviously to try and take credit for it. To make things right, Leto posted a custom image showing the Ridgeline Games credit list as he believed it should have appeared. The list included dozens of developers across cinematics, design, art, animation, engineering, and production, all of whom he said played a major role in shaping the early version of BF6. Initially, Leto's post, I'd love to know why he left, right? Initially, Leto's post included a list of 5 former Ridgeline employees he believed were missing from the official Battlefield 6 credits. However, he later clarified that 3 of those individuals were in fact credited elsewhere within the game. As it stands, only 2 names, Leto and himself, the lead technical artist Rohan Nuki, appear to have been left out entirely. So Marcus Leto, obviously the VP, Studio GM, Creative Director, lead tech artist Rohan Nuki, he emphasized that game development is a team effort and proper credit matters. Well, you should have stuck with the project to the end. So basically, they're the only people that were left out, but he thinks, again, I wonder why he left the project. And there's the image where he says, obviously these people should have been, including himself, should have been given proper credit. But Ridgeline Games was closed. A lot of people were moved to different projects, different studios. Let's do a little bit of digging and seeing why he left, right? All right, sorry if I've been calling him Andrew Leto, my bad. I'm confusing him for Andrew Wilson, the head of EA. But here's my question to Grok. What's it going to say? Because right now I asked, why did Marcus Leto leave Ridgeline Games? Did he just abandon them mid-development? And is Ridgeline Games the reason the campaign has been getting flack in the community for not being polished enough? Now, we can go into that a little bit more, but obviously we saw bugs, scripted AI things that were kind of just a little bit buggy, and overall the campaign's not been getting amazing feedback. Granted, campaign in Battlefield games has by far not been the most important aspect. I think when the majority of us get on Battlefield, we want to play it for the multiplayer. That's the heart of where Battlefield started, I feel like. And it's still the most important part, at least for me, anyway. Let me know if you disagree. But yeah, let's see. So, Grok said, Marcus Leto, the co-creator of Halo, who served as game director for Battlefield's single-player efforts at Ridgeline Games, left the studio in February 2024. He described his departure as a personal decision at the time, but the timing aligned closely with EA's decision to shut down Ridgeline Games entirely. Reports indicate he exited just 1 day before the closure was publicly announced. Okay, so fair enough. They were going to shutter EA. It's EA's fault. So EA were basically going to shutter Ridgeline Games entirely anyway, and I guess Marcus Leto just decided to save face and was like, you know what? Screw you guys, I'm leaving. I mean, okay. It sounds pretty fair. Suggesting he was informed of the impending shutdown and chose to leave ahead of it. This is kind of ridiculous. I mean, EA, surprise, surprise, Ryan. They decided to shutter their, they're one of their biggest franchises, studios that were working on the brand new campaign for the game that we're hoping was going to save EA, which it kind of has a little bit in a big way, with how successful it was and brought the franchise back from the dead. But at the same time, it doesn't surprise me. Typical EA, right? Yeah, but this doesn't appear to be the case of him abandoning the team mid-development without cause. Rather, the studio's closure by EA disrupted the project, and his exit was part of that broader upheaval. Ridgeline was tasked with developing narrative-driven content for the Battlefield games, including the foundation for what became Battlefield 6's campaign, but the studio's dissolution led to the work being handed off to other teams like Criterion Games. So maybe, Ridgeline Games was, it was a passion project, it was his baby, and EA were like, yeah, we're just going to shutter your studio, move everyone off to other studios. I don't blame him. I mean, I'd be kind of pissed off too, and just be like, you know what, screw you guys, I'm leaving. So yeah, okay, his anger at the not being properly credited makes a bit more sense. Fair enough. I went into this thinking he was the issue from what I read in previous articles, but I guess not. Regarding the community backlash against Battlefield 6's campaign feeling unpolished, yes, Ridgeline Games' involvement and subsequent shutdown seemed to be a key factor in those criticisms. The campaign was drawn significant flack since the game's release earlier this month for being short, only around 5 hours and 9 missions, rushed, lacking depth, and featuring poor writing, scripting bugs, unpolished cutscenes, and unrealistic military elements that felt like Hollywood tropes rather than authentic experiences. Community discussions, such as on Steam forums, attribute much of this to Ridgeline's closure in early 2024 due to slow progress and production failures, which forced a restart with a reduced scope and tight deadlines under other studios. Okay, that makes sense. So they were kind of missing a lot of deadlines and there was a lot of production failures and whatnot. So EA took the decision to basically hand off development to other studios. I can understand that. If they had a deadline, they wanted to get this thing out for, in 2025. It does feel like, to me, from an outside perspective, that Battlefield came out a little bit sooner than I thought it would. Not that I'm complaining, because I've been wanting a new Battlefield game for so long. In Battlefield 6 is like everything I wanted. Granted, they could have better maps, bigger maps, but I think it's got a solid foundation. But yeah, I guess that could be why they wanted to shutter Ridgeline Games. Maybe Ridgeline Games weren't ideally the ideal studio for them initially to handle a project of this scale, right? But anyways, if the product felt like an afterthought or a marketing piece rather than a fully realized mode, reviews echo this, noting it's the absolute bare minimum for a AAA campaign and pales in comparison to earlier Battlefield entries like BF3 and BF4. Battlefield 3 and 4 did have legendary campaigns. I mean, remember jumping into a ship, a jet on an aircraft carrier in the air, like it was so cinematic, walking up the different decks and the ship, like iconic. Talk about iconic. So yeah, it's a little bit disappointing the way this panned out, and I'm starting to see, it partially Ridgeline's fault, missing deadlines, production quality things not being met. Obviously Marcus Leto plays a role in that for the failures at Ridgeline Games. I also don't blame him a little bit for leaving, because EA took the decision to hand off development to other studios. He was, it's Ridgeline Games is probably his baby. So, I mean, at that, when you get the news that your studio is getting closed down and moved, the project they've been working on for like 1.5 to 2 years, 2.5 years, has been handed off to other people because your team has been it's just not been hitting the mark. I get that. I mean, what else could he do? But yeah, maybe we'll never know what he thinks of the campaign himself. I'd love to see. I get why he complained not being credited. At the same time, I'd love to get his thoughts on, how the Battlefield 6 campaign ended up turning out. Is that Ridgeline's fault? How, what was his perspective in terms of the failures that EA saw in Ridgeline Games in terms of missing deadlines and certain things not panning out the way they'd have liked. I'd love to know Marcus Leto's thoughts on that. But yeah, just a little bit of drama in the Battlefield community. Again, no, I'm not going to point the blame at Marcus Leto. I'm not going to point the blame at EA. It just seems like they fumbled it a little bit, with the campaign for Battlefield 6 being supposed to be a resurgence for the Battlefield franchise. And it, like I said, it has been, and it continues to be, and their content pipeline that they've got coming up, especially later this week, is pretty good. And if they can keep this cadence going, it'll be good. But it just seems like such a missed opportunity that they fumbled the Battlefield 6's campaign. It wasn't by any means like horrible, but it was the bare minimum, and it did come off a little bit unpolished, and it's just a shame. I wonder if it's because EA decided to start development on it so late. Maybe Ridgeline Games just couldn't meet the tight deadlines. I have no idea, but I'd love to know more, and I'm pretty sure you would too. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. I'm Blaze2K. If you love gaming, please like, subscribe, click the bell icon, and come join me every day for some Battlefield 6 goodness. There's always something going on in this community. Peace out, guys.
Let's go.